The C factor. Okay. I like it when people turn their cameras on, but don't feel obligated to sit down here in front of the camera the whole time. Stand up, go get a drink, whatever. And the reason cameras on is because it's more of a social thing for us. Of course, you know, if you don't want to, that's okay too. And mics, feel free to open your mic and make comments, things like that. Okay, so the C factor, let's start with, you've all had those really good English classes where everything, jives and the students are learning and they're making progress. Everybody's, everything's going well and the things that you made are working out. What makes that happen? Of course, there's many factors, but please feel free to unmute or type in the chat and go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you. What factors make a great English course?
I was gonna actually, my besides chicken, my honest guess for C would have been conversation.
Conversation, okay.
And I see others have said it in there as well in collaboration. Yeah.
Collaboration. Okay, well, don't guess the C. I didn't mean to mislead you with that because it's not quite what you'd think. It's not an easy word to guess. It represents something else. Oh, there's Adam. Hi, Adam. Some more ideas. What makes a good class? And don't guess C words. Okay, we've got some things in the chat. Willingness to communicate, process syllabus, learner involvement, report, relaxed atmosphere, comfort, engagement. Yes, yes, yes. These are all important parts. It doesn't have to begin with a C. Andy Boone said Curtis. You're right. Challenge, group identity, intention to participate. Very interesting answers. Oh, that's kind of odd, actually, because, I went online and looked at a number of sites that said what makes a good class. And here's one: 9 elements of an outstanding English language lesson. Okay, this is from English and Culture site. Clear goals and objectives, a fun and motivating atmosphere. By that, they mean mainly location and time. A focus on student talking time, 20% teacher, 80% student. A clear link between the lesson and everyday life. Immediate error correction, accountability and high expectations. Integration of the cultural knowledge and skills. Inspiring and well-traveled teacher. Yeah, those are great 9 elements of an outstanding English language classroom, right? Nobody can disagree with those. Or here's another one. What makes a good speaking class? This is from Richmond Share. The teacher, the students, the tasks, the learning environment, the feedback. Okay, that's all pretty typical. What makes a class good? Here's another thing. This is from the Iowa Teacher Training Network or something. I'll let you read that. So it's teacher traits and student traits. The student traits being should show enthusiasm and give feedback to the professor. Should be ready to use the expertise of the professor. Should strive to be challenging to learn more. And I looked at least 20 sites with this kind of information, and even some of the classics like Jeremy Harmer. Jeremy Harmer pretty much said the same thing, but he said one more thing, which is dress well to show your students that you appreciate them. Okay. Oh, interesting. I disagree with the immediate error correction. That's nice. Yeah, that's good. I like that. But we pretty much see the same kind of things: assessment, teacher expertise, expectation, student effort, level, and sort of. Then down here in the green, I was going to have this as a build, but I forgot. These are things that we've learned from brain sciences: interleaving, spaced repetition, use of emotion, sleep, movement, getting people moving around. But there's something missing. There's something missing. And that's what I call the C factor. And some of you mentioned it, actually. There's actually a lot of people mentioned it. Some people said report, or the way the students are willing to interact with each other, things like that. And to me, the C factor is the connected classroom, the connections. I don't mean connected like, internet connected. But you probably noticed when students have a good rapport with each other, when they have this sort of bond, they're more willing to engage, more willing to do things. So student-student relationships are huge, have a huge impact on the way the class goes, the quality of the class. But the thing is, you never see that in the research. I just showed you those 3 different sites that represent 20 more that I looked at that all say the same thing. They're all focused on the teacher. How the teacher presents the materials, how the classroom. Very little of the light gets shined on the learner. In fact, I think that's been a problem in our field for a long time. I remember going to a TESOL about 10 years ago, and there was a thing about the 10 big ideas of this year, and from Japan was Mark Helgeson, and all the 10 big discoveries or big ideas about teaching language were from linguistics and corpus studies, or linguistics, or a new way of understanding grammar. There's nothing about the learners themselves until we got to Mark. And Mark right away talked about relationships and learners and other things. But it's like we've had this big light in language teaching that we shined on the language. And now we're just getting to the point where we're shining it on the learners. But still the connected classroom, it's just something you don't see in the research. For example, I did a Google search, student relationships. I had to write this article about student-to-student relationships. And everything that came up for the first 5 pages was building relationships with students, what brain science, why strong teachers' relationships lead to student. Again, it was all focused on the teacher. Lots of teacher-student relationships, but almost nothing on student-to-student relationships. So we've been kind of misled by our trainers because this has been omitted. And it was like that for me until Matthew Lieberman. I saw his TED Talk about 1.5 years ago, the social brain and superpowers. And this started me on this kind of new journey that led to this presentation here. Basically, Lieberman says, we have this part of our brain called the Mentalizing Network. This huge part of our brain that's just like our social brain. We're always watching other people, trying to figure out what they're thinking, how they feel about things. And it's actually almost exactly the same as our default mode network. So when we're not using our brain for something else, this part of our brain takes over and gets activated. And mentalizing, it's kind of a terrible word, but it means using other people's facial body, verbal cues to figure out their thoughts, moods, and intentions. I saw this comic, I thought that was perfect. And to show you how powerful this is, even though we're barely aware of it, well, here's a picture by Paul Ekman, the famous psychologist for facial expressions. And he's smiling. There's just a little bit of a difference. Tell me, open your mics. Tell me, what's different about these smiles, or how do you feel about them? Number 1 and number 2. I had to put those numbers up there because before, when I showed this, people say, well, on the left or on the right, and it's hard to tell what's left or right. So what do you think, Ann, looking at these?
Yeah, eyes.
Jerry, what do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the eyes.
Yeah. What about the eyes?
I go, one, he's got the little kind of, what do you call it, crinkle eyes or whatever, the little folds at the eyes there. Yeah.
He's got the crow's feet.
Yeah.
I was thinking the guy on the left is smiling with his eyes as well. So it sort of looks like I'm just genuinely happy. And the guy on the right is happy as I just spat in your burger, happy.
So number 2, guy on the left is number 1. Yeah, well, that's it. All of us can almost instantly recognize which is a sincere smile and which is a fake smile. This is real and this is fake. If you look at it, there's just hardly any difference between these. But again, the crow's feet, the eyes are smaller. There's just something that we can pick up. And that just shows how powerful our mentalizing network is. And it's on all the time that we're dealing with people. And even people that are, 10,000 miles away, we're watching, figuring out how they feel about each other. And that, by the way, is why there's something called Zoom fatigue, because people are not looking at you, they're looking at the screen, a picture of you, or it's pixelated, or their facial reactions to things you say are like a half-second delayed. And until you get used to Zoom, I'm sort of used to it, I don't get this anymore, but until you get when you first start using Zoom, your brain gets really tired quickly because it's trying to compensate for all these new rules of mentalizing. Well, Lieberman called this our superpower, the social brain. It's something that no other species had, no other primate has either, which is why they can only work together in groups up to 50 or so. But Lieberman said, we have a kryptonite too. And it is education. Well, for those of you that don't know Superman stories, kryptonite is the mineral that took away all of his superpowers. Okay, so we have this social mentalizing network. But we also have a different network called the analyzing network. And this is where the working memory is and the parts of things we use. And this is usually where teachers teach, to the analyzing network. Teaching one person one at a time, not using the social power of our brain for educational purposes. And these two areas are kind of on a neural seesaw, where if one is active, the other is not. They both can't be active at the same time very well, but both cause learning. Well, we know that. In language teaching, we're already really strongly oriented towards group work, pair work, and things like that. These are my students solving a mystery that I made in class last year. Look how happy they are, even with their masks on. But most of education is like this. The teacher teaches the student, and that's the meaning of the word pedagogy. The knowledge of the foot, or the one who's under. But since I heard Lieberman, I've been noticing more and more about how important student collaboration and connection is. And although it's not really much in the literature, there are people that are doing research on it, as these two articles here, what research says about the academic power of friendship, how friends influence one another for better or worse in high school. So let's discuss what are some advantages of having that connected classroom where the students know each other and like each other. By the way, sometimes they connect in the bad way too, where one kind of negative person takes over. There's a lot of hankoki spread through the class. But let's talk about the positive connection in the classroom. And please, everybody, please open your mics and talk, and I just want to hear your ideas. What are some of the advantages for us or for students? The ability to ask for help with your peers when you don't understand something. They have empathy. ZPD, students learn from each other, not just from the teacher. And Masanori, Andy, thank you. Building a community of active learners. Namiko, thank you. Feel free to speak out too. Open your mics. I'm kind of lonely here. Phil's getting ready to say something maybe. His Dr. Seuss background. It's more real world, a sense of belonging, near peer role models. Yep. Thank you, Tetsuya, Phil, Andy.
I suppose sorry, Curtis, to butt in. I suppose the big thing is that learners are more willing to actively involve in using language and not be sort of too worried about making mistakes. So there's sort of that loss of face there, which is obviously determined a lot by sociocultural factors, depending on where you are in the world. But that loss of face is quite big for some learners. So creating that group there really sort of helps reduce that.
That lack of threat from peers. Yeah, absolutely. That's, in fact, that's one of the most important things. And students that don't know each other are always kind of concerned about what the other people are, what they're thinking. But if you know the people around you are friends, you're not as afraid to make mistakes or engage or do things. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. I was just going to add to that, in my students where I do a heck of a lot of pair work and group work and things like that, I find that, yeah, if they've got a good rapport with each other, that goes a lot smoother. Because if one of them's running into problems, it's now I've got to help out my friend. So it's not just the lack of intimidation or something like that, but it's also I want to help this person, and so they try to help each other more.
absolutely, Adam, Jim, everybody else, you guys are so far ahead of the research, you know. I'm always surprised at how much more JALT people know than famous researchers in education. But let's look at a little bit of the research, Gallans and Carmack 2013. Having students with friends are more willing to participate, just what you said. That's just what Jim told us. Here's one that kind of surprised me, makes sense. They'll behave better in class because their friends are watching. So they'll model good behavior to each other as well. Greater willingness to help each other, exactly what Adam and Jerry were saying, that, you know, if they don't understand something, I didn't get that. Could you tell them, help me with it? I'm having trouble with the homework. They're willing to go out and to take care of each other that way. They're willing to share new learning. I mean, after a conference, how many times you've gone out with your mates and said, oh, you won't believe what I heard today. You know, Grant was talking about how kids have these, whatever. You were willing to share new learning with each other. What about the disadvantages of not having a friend? Lower grades, less engaged, worse attendance. I remember somebody I was teaching at Han Women's College, and I asked her why she didn't come to class, and she said, well, I didn't come to class today because my friend didn't go to class. There's no reason. Decline in mental health. What? Decline in mental health. What does that mean? Well, let's look at the dark year. There's a 12-month period that's been identified in research. This is my own term, by the dark year. There's in high school and university, there's this 12-month period where normal rates of depression in high school and college are about 5.6%. But in this 12-year period, it goes to 20%. And it's mainly women. It's still double for men at 10.2, but for women, it's 28.4. When do you think this year is? And also related to suicide, because depression is like the forerunner of suicide, which is the top cause of student death in Japan. So yeah, open your mics or open your chats. And when do you think this 12-month period is? (2020). I don't mean it like that. Oh yeah, the pandemic. I should have foreseen. I mean, this was research done before the pandemic.
Yeah, first year students
Okay, you're half right.
between first and
Everybody,
second year.
damn year. And Adams is the other half right. It's the last 6 months of high school and the first 6 months of university. The last 6 months of high school are, you know, there's all kinds of pressures and traumas and taking entrance exams and things like that. Then they get to school and they're without any friends and they're feeling so dislocated. There's imposter syndrome, all other kinds of things. So it is. Oops. The last 6 months of high school and the first 6 months of university, when rates of depression triple. And again, as I said, depression is the precursor to suicide, and suicide is the largest killer of Japanese students. Counseling centers don't help. Only 19% of the suicidees sought help from a university counseling center. But what does help is having friends. So what's our role in making this connected classroom? It's huge, and I'm sure you know that. And again, we get back to the research and what are the 10 skills that'll make you the best teacher, you know, blah, 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 pronunciation. This is from Ireland, the Galway Cultural Institute. Develop your teaching materials, confidence, assessment, reflecting on your practice, mastery of your use technology in the classroom, keep up to date with the latest methods, gain new practical skills, get equipped to teach it. Why are we so teacher-centered in our thinking? When maybe it's really something like this. A teacher who can engender a connected classroom. Louis Cozzolino, who wrote The Attachment Theories of Psychologists and The Tribal Classroom, how classroom is really making a tribe. Talk about taking a course with Carl Rogers, the great super empathic psychiatrist, psychologist. And he said he wanted to be adopted by that guy after the first class. He just knew how to talk to everybody, to make them feel good about themselves and to like each other. Because education is not like this. This is a painting in Portland, Oregon. It's more something like this. So now I'd like to get your ideas. How can we help students connect? And of course, one way by using the social brain is to have more tutoring or having students teach each other. And why don't we make some breakout rooms with about 3 people per room for about 4 or 5 minutes here?
I'm afraid we can't. I'm sorry. It's because we're already in a breakout room.
Oh, that's right. So Anne, let's not make a breakout. So let's just open us up for discussion from everybody.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
So yeah, please open your mics and say your ideas, and I'll try to be quiet. How can we help students connect?
Curtis, if I can say, the first step is to try and remember names and something about each other. So the introductory icebreaker lessons are super important, not only for the teacher, but for students to student. So they know each other's name and they know maybe they like soccer or they like One Direction or something like that. Getting to know each other is a really important step.
Yeah, I would take that one step further, Andy, and say that at the start of the year or start of the term, often we make the mistake of moving far too quickly into the content of courses and not dealing with the social element of the classroom. So rather than moving straight into working from course books or language focus, taking those, I would say even to 2 weeks of classes, looking and building up that, as we said, as Curtis has mentioned, that tribe in the classroom. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Great idea. By the way, that's related to something I discovered with my junior college students. Instead of having the class party on the last day of class, I started having it on the first day of class, and it made a huge difference.
I wrote this in the chat as well, but I teach younger learners, and for younger learners, we start the classes with a circle time and let them share something about their day if they want to. And that way they kind of connect with each other and get to know each other. And it really helps the class run more smoothly than when you don't do that.
How about teacher attitude or policy? Adam.
Yeah, I was also, because the comment on having the what about happened to your day or something like that. Do a similar thing in mind. Take 0 prep time. Real simple. Tell the person next to you what you did on the weekend. And that's it. They every week they're connecting a little bit. But the other one that I put down there in the chat was to find out how students prefer to connect, because they don't always want to connect by talking to the person next to them either. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Good. Keep them coming, folks. What kind of activities? What about teacher policies? Teacher attitudes?
I just think that the breakout rooms that I've used now have been wonderful. I'm hoping to keep something when we finally get back to face-to-face. Oh, please let it be soon. But having a breakout room session, and the last 5 minutes of breakout rooms, I said, hey, free talking. And if you use Japanese, I won't say anything. Just say something to the people in the breakout room with you.
Okay.
And keep it going. So I choose a theme each week in the breakout rooms, and try and somewhat related to book. We, like animals and food, movies, whatever. And a lot of it has thank you to the book Topic Talk, which is old but still kicking, and I've used questions from there. But choose a theme each week. Students have put into breakout rooms, change the breakout rooms around each week. And then I say, okay, and usually I run them for 20 minutes, which, seems pretty good. And there's like 10, 15 questions. The answer to the questions, okay, last 5 minutes, just talk. And I don't care what language you use. I said, I just want you to talk to each other. You don't get to see each other in class. You just need to talk.
Jerry, you're hitting on something, and Adam and Ann mentioned it too. And Harumi Kimura wrote this great paper for our think tanks based on her research called Student Civility. She says a lot of times in pair work, when students are speaking Japanese to each other, it's the one who's better at English, who has a high level of emotional intelligence, trying to encourage the other one who's having problems to come out. Are you okay? Do you want me to help, or do you need some help with this? And too often we intervene right away, speak English. Whereas sometimes that need for them to speak Japanese to each other is important. So I started feeling that way about breakout rooms too. If I go into a breakout room and they're speaking Japanese, I don't get angry. I say, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here, should I? And zoom out. If they feel really guilty, they'll start speaking English. But a lot of times, just being able to speak to each other in Japanese and socialize a little bit is what I call letting them get into the right brain state for learning, which means to feel relaxed, to feel connected, and ready to engage. So that's it. And how about a teacher that's always scolding students or getting angry all the time? How does that affect that feeling of confidence and familiarity? I can't get my things that I have to delete. The hell with it. Screen, clear all my drawings. Okay, but how does that affect students? I remember once when I was on a bus and I asked a student, how do you like your classes? This is a junior college first year student. And she said, oh, I like this class. I said, oh, really? Why? Is it a good topic? No, because the teacher is yasashi. And I don't like this class because the teacher is kawaii. And it took me a long time to understand that that was really a comment on the type of the class atmosphere that allowed students like that to feel confident enough to engage in the learning instead of always worried about the teacher. Well, these are all topics that we've been thinking about, and we even have an issue that came out this year on Student to Student about the connected classroom. So if you're not subscribed to the think tanks, I think most of you are, then please do so, because this is a huge area of research that's just pretty much been missed. And that's the end of my presentation at exactly 1 minute before ending time. So I guess there's time for one question or something, or other comments. So thank you.
Actually, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Oh, we have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard 30 minutes. Oh, good. Then
40-minute presentation slot.
So does that mean Curtis can repeat the whole thing now I've just arrived, because I was presenting in the other room?
Yeah, he needs to do it faster this time. It's like a 3-2-1 activity, except, 3 and 0.1.
So yeah. So, we're talking about the social brain, so that means tutoring. So somebody has to teach you. Andy, tutor Rab. What we talked about. Okay, I'm kidding.
I can teach him in one word: connected.
Connected. There you go. Hey, come on, you're not supposed to talk about Portland. Oh no, that's okay. All right, so
There's a really interesting comment in the chat box right now from Namiko.
if you observe a preschool classroom, you can learn a lot about how teachers promote socialization and conflict resolution simply through facilitation and sometimes non-engagement. Namiko, what does that mean by non-engagement? To letting them work
Sorry.
out?
Yeah, when I was at Michigan, actually, I studied early childhood development, and part of my, I suppose, quote, research was to observe how children played in preschool settings. And it's really fascinating to see how teachers are quite hands-off. And then when I returned to Japan and I started teaching in kindergarten as well, I also noticed the same thing, that ideas and especially ideas about community building in preschool and kindergarten are actually the same in both countries. And it's just a shame because when you get to primary school and secondary school, a lot of emphasis then is on assessment. And so kids who were actually taught to do a lot of these things naturally, it's not that they forget, but the priorities are different for teachers. And so students then have to kind of relearn these things when they get back into the real world. So if we can continue to do what teachers actually promote naturally, since kids start school, then we would solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah, Namiko, that's super fantastic. And in fact, I wrote about that I'm dropping it in the chat. This issue that we have, the mind brain think tanks we have on children, how a lot of what preschool and elementary school teachers is building executive functions, letting students learn how to relate to each other, how to restrain themselves. And that's why teachers of children are the most important teachers in all the universe, because those executive skills that they instill or help instill last children's entire lifetimes. And there's research that supports that very strongly. Yeah, thank you. That's great. I'll put in this issue in the screen too. What about first year students? Okay, here's a problem. I have a 60 student first year business English class. These are not people who want to study English. So how could I do something to help them connect? And the answer was with dyadic circles, or actually dyadic lines. I'd have 10 students face another 10 students in 3 different aisles or 3 different rows, have them do some simple exchange, like tell your partner about something you bought, ask your partner questions about it, let them speak for a few minutes, then change, do the same exchange. They would, one line would move one person to the right, the person in the front would go to the end. They do the exchange again with somebody else, and maybe doing that 3 or 4 times. They loved it. So there's this one class where I got these little comment cards at the end, where usually students are telling me things about, oh, today's my birthday, or I had too much homework. There's one set of comment cards that I got at the end of class where more than half of them said today's class was really good. And I thought, what was different? And I realized that particular class, I had them we did more dyadic circles or lines, and each student had talked with 10 other people that they had mainly never talked to before. And so they got even more from that particular class just because of that factor, I think. Another thing I discovered, I teach a Chukyu Business Ego A business English course. I make a little company, my company, and I put students in groups of 4 to design a tour to a foreign city. But here's the thing. The students in the group of 4 each have a different role that's decided by their job interview activity. One person's a manager, one person's a graphic designer, one person's a researcher, the other's a sales director, and they have different homework assignments that they all have to do to collaborate to make this project work. And this is not just one class, this is the entire semester. So the managers have to send me an email report every week. the graphic designers have to design the guidebook style and all this stuff. But giving them that kind of interconnection, those interrelationships, even in the classroom materials, works really well too, I think. Tetsuya said, some of you may be interested in a concept called school belonging. Are there any ideas on how to change the thinking to get some funds to the teachers of children? Oh no, sorry, I was interested in a concept called school belonging, which is sometimes interchangeable with connectedness, affiliation, and membership. Tetsuya, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I wrote a dissertation, my dissertation about that concept, L2 motivation and school belonging. And yeah, I agree with you. Not so much has been researched on in SLA about belonging and connectedness and so on. But if you guys are interested in finding more about what is discussed in educational psychology or in pure psychology, I have a list of books and papers to read. Especially, I have read some papers about meta-analysis on school belonging. School belonging consists of many other small concepts, but the main concept is connectedness with other students.
Do you have a paper that you've written or a bibliography, anything you could drop in the chat for us? A link?
Thank you very much. Then I will put the link to my dissertation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I spent 4 months or 6 months on sabbatical reading everything I could on motivation, from Dornia to everybody else to Pinker. And I just couldn't be satisfied. But there was one paper by somebody from Japan, and I can't find it anymore, that says motivation is not an individual thing, it's a group thing. Wow, what a fantastic idea, because just like Louis Cozzolino says, Western psychology is based on the individual. So it's already false, because what we are is how we're connected to other people and how we interact with them. And our relationships determine our thinking and our actions and everything else.
Yeah, I have read Cozzolino, two of his most recent books. And also, I agree with you. Recently, most L2 motivation researchers in Japan and in the world are discussing more about, group motivation and school motivation and other things. So many people are saying it's not individual trait or individual differences. Of course, we can find individual differences, but we should do research more about groups. That's my understanding. Thanks.
Maha, what about Finland? I know Finland has much more teacher-student care for students that are not making it. Could you tell us more about that, Maha? Okay, got a 2-minute warning here. All right, I'm going to try to drop in a Cozzolino link.
I've got another question, if
Sure.
If it's okay. I mean, I know we were waiting for Maha, but okay. So if you've got, I put this on the chat, but how would you support students whose preferred connection styles are anything but F2F speaking? F2F speaking freaks me out. I clam up. My skin goes clammy. I break into a cold sweat. I can't do this. How do you get them connected?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I'm hoping to get other people's answers first before I divulge my thoughts on the matter.
I think this is a case where, again, a really scripted interaction can work, but I have had students that couldn't even talk to each other at all. In fact, this one student, well, it's a long story, but again, putting them in groups where they work together week after week, sometimes it's better for students that are a little bit introverted. For an introverted student, the scariest thing you can say is find a partner. This is Heather McCulloch wrote a great article on that in 2020, one of my favorites.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly, for this wonderful presentation. I'm afraid the time is over, but if people want to continue chatting, there are chill out rooms, and our chill out room is chill out room 1, if you want to go there and continue on the subject or have more questions. And otherwise, let's give Curtis Kelly a round of applause.